From master storyteller George Lucas comes the adventures of young Indiana Jones.
Paramount expected that we were going to make 20 episodes every year of Indiana Jones, the film.
Join young Indy as he travels the world.
George was producing it with his own money, and he hired only movie directors.
They're the adventures that made the man, and the man that became the legend. The adventures of young Indiana Jones.
First, I wanted to talk about what brought you to Indiana Jones.
Yes, my first film, I was like 25, and it was a film. It was such a financial disaster that Dennis Potter, the writer who was English, told me and asked me, he said, why don't you come to England where failure is a way of life? You'll do really well. And I had no choice. So I remember the day the film Pennies from Heaven opened, when I was in New York and I went back to Los Angeles on the Saturday, and they were already painting my name out of my parking space. So I knew my days were numbered. In England, I was able to make like 10 films back to back. None of them were particularly successful, but they were good. So as long as you work with a good director and great actors, you could continue to work. You didn't want to be too successful because then you wouldn't be able to work again.
During the 80s, you produced a movie called Dream Child, and I think you met someone on the set of Dream Child.
Yeah, that's where I met George. I was shooting at Elstree Studios, and he was helping a director. It was a film called Return to Oz, and it was a big, huge movie. But I had a small office at Elstree, and we were shooting in a warehouse, a very low-budget film. But I was working with the Jim Henson Creature Shop, and he wanted to come over and take a look, and that's where I first met him. And I think he wanted to be on our set more than he wanted to be on this big, huge film. Anyway, that's where I met him for the first time.
A few years later, he called you to talk about a series that he had in mind, right?
Yeah, about 5 years later, we met again. He was interviewing for people to do the series. And we met. We got along really well. We spent a couple of hours together, and he kind of outlined his dream of what his vision of digital cinema would be, and he wanted to use Indiana Jones as a platform, a blueprint, in order to eventually make Star Wars, which he was going to finance. So we wanted to, figure out the cheapest way, to shoot in a kind of guerrilla fashion all over the world, and to be able to do it for very little money because he was going to finance everything. And, Young Indy was the first television series to use digital technology, digital matte paintings. So we wanted to explore that through Industrial Light and Magic, his effects company, which basically at that time was an analog company. So we had a very small group of young digital artists, and they were doing 50, 60 shots of each episode. So it was a real big learning curve for everybody. And then the ability to shoot, literally around the world made it easier for us to be able to start planning Star Wars.
René, now, so you were quite successful with your first movie, first long feature film, Le Passage with Alain Delon.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a film d'auteur, not a commercial movie, and he just broke everything, every record. And because of that, because it was a commercial movie in France was really bad to make a commercial movie in the 80s, I didn't work for 3 years, So it took me 3 years before I could make another film.
And this other film was 3615 Code Père Noël in French.
Dial Code Santa Claus.
Oh, yes, in English.
A.K.A. Deadly Games now in the States. And, yeah.
And A.K.A. Home Alone before Home Alone, right?
Yeah, that's another story. Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
basically, it was ripped off by John Hughes. And, it was a huge, incredible success around the world. And because of the rip-off, actually, my career began in the States because everybody could see that, the film was done before. And so the studios, they didn't give a shit about, who. They said, okay, let's hire that guy, and he's going to write, high concepts for us. And that's why I began working.
In fact, that's how I actually got to meet René. Steven Spielberg was the executive producer of the series, and he said, do you have any French directors? And I said, no, we've been trying. We had a Dutch director, Australian, English, Indian. We had a lot of really interesting, great directors. And he said, yeah, but do you have anybody French? And I said, no, I can't find anybody who speaks English who wants to do it. And he said, I think we've got a guy. And he sent me the passage. And I looked at it. I said, putain, c'est fantastique. Let's do it. And that's how we met.
Yeah, it's through Stephen.
Through Stephen, yeah.
Through Stephen. And then I was a fan. Stephen was a fan of Le Passage,
yeah.
But of Dad's called Santa Claus because
exactly,
he was watching it with his kids and stuff. And so basically it became very important in my career, exactly as Delon had been.
About the series, you said it was a little budget, but you would think like George Lucas already made the first 3 Star Wars. He was a huge star. Everybody think it's George Lucas. He should have like unlimited budget for his series. So why did you have such a small budget?
Because when you're financing a film yourself, you want to make it for as little money as humanly possible. Yes, it's true. When he made the first series of Star Wars, they were so successful that it was kind of a curse and a blessing because he's actually a very small filmmaker. He likes his favorite, he had a great time making THX. He had a great time making American Graffiti, except that the studios in both films took the film away from him. So he was determined to be, to try and make a successful film, which he could own the rights to and be able to finance his own film so he never had to work with the studio again. So that was the master plan of his right from the very beginning when he was a young filmmaker.
We should watch what you achieved to do with such a small budget and such constraint. Now it's a first segment of the series.
And that was shot in a day.
So there is a funny story about it. And basically it set up our relationship because when I arrived there in Prague, the idea, because of the budget, because of what we talk about how tight the budget was, because George was producing it with his own money, and he was, he thought that it should be really big in terms of production value, in terms of scope. It was like little movies for him. It was not TV. And he hired only movie directors. There was no TV directors. And there was no American directors. All directors were, from foreign countries. And when I arrived, Rick took me aside and he said, René, I have to tell you something, because I know you guys, I know you directors. You read the script. There are battle scenes in the script, but those scenes, we're going to use stock shots for those scenes. I said, what? We're going to use stock shots for the scenes, But,
already existing shots from other movies, right?
Stock shots means using shots that were already, shot by somebody else. And he said to me, but look at the tape, don't overreact. Look at the tape. And it comes from a very beautiful movie. It's on the Western Front. You got Oscars and stuff. So just look at the tape. So I went to the hotel immediately. I just watched. It was on VHS at the time. I watched it, and it was. I tried to be very open-minded. I try hard, and when I watched, it was beautiful, but it was completely different of what I had in mind, because it was high-angle shots, the plongées. Everything was like from above. So there were plenty of extras, more than I will ever have. But at the same time, it was not Verdun, because for me, Verdun was at the level of the dead. Because in Verdun, they used to say, rise up days, rise and shine, dead people. That's what they used to say to the people before going to the trenches. Rise and shine, dead people. So for me, the camera should be there. And so it was completely wrong. It was completely wrong. So I said, I was mad as hell. But at the same time, I said, René, you have to find a way now to go back to see Rick. And, he's the producer of the show. You're just a for-hire director. And you're going to explain to him what you have in mind. So I went to the Barendorf studio. It was big studios in Prague, where we were prepping. And I went to see the first AD, le premier assistant. And I asked him, give me the schedule. Donnez-moi le planning. And so I look at the planning, at the schedule. And on the schedule, there was a travel day. And I said to the editor, why there is this travel day? And he said, because we need to go to, we are in Prague, René. We need to go out to do Verdun. And I said, okay. So I pull out a compass. I always have a compass on the set. And I watched the compass, and I went around a lot. And on the compass, I see in front of me there is Prague, right? In my back, there is the studio, the building. On the left side, there is an electric pillar. And on the right side, there is the freeway, then the bridge, l'autoroute. And I said, okay, I go back, I go inside, and Rick was having lunch. And just you have to keep in mind that we have met like a day before. So I don't know him, he doesn't know me. He's having lunch. And so I said, Rick, I really need to talk to you. Can you come with me outside? And he said, I'm having lunch, René. I said, yes, I know. You're having lunch, yes. But you can have lunch later, I haven't had lunch,
You're French. You know how important lunch is.
Yeah. And so he said, you're my producer, I need you. Yeah, of course. Okay, I'm going to come. So he comes with me outside. And we are on the lot of the Barendorf studio. On est sur le studio et tout est, il y a du terrain sur le studio. And I said to him, this is Verdun. He said, what? This is Verdun. We're going to shoot here. And he says, are you kidding me, René? I mean, this is Prague in front of us. And on the left side, there is this big pillar, on the right side, the highway, not to mention the building, behind us. And I said, the building is north. I never shoot north. It's front light, it's ugly. He said, yes, but what about Prague? What about the pillar? What about the highway? I said, put your eye at the level of the dead, because that's Verdun. That's where the camera should be, at the level of the dead. So we're going to turn upside down all those earth, because it's not concrete, it's earth. We're going to turn that upside down. And so suddenly, with the ups and downs, you will never see Prague. You will never see the pillar. You will never see the highway. And I will never shoot north. And so he looked at me, and in his eyes, I could see that, the gears were turning, And he said to me, okay, but we shoot in 14 days, René. I said, I know. And we have a travel day on the schedule. And during that travel day, the crew is paid. Even if it's half, they are paid. And so if we don't go there, we're going to save gas. We're going to not, buy rent trucks. We're going to have lunch here in Barendorf. We're supposed to have lunch, and I'm taking you off of lunch. And we're going to save money. And actually, if I do my job well, and I intend to, you're going to use my footage as stock shot for the rest of the episodes. And he looked at me with a smile after this big speech, And he said to me, what about extras, René? I need 100. Oh, okay, he said, 100 French. No. I need 200 costumes and 100 extras. We're going to change costumes. I'm going to shoot the French side, and then I'm going to shoot the German side. And he said to me at that moment, and I know I didn't know him before, like 2 days after we meet, and he says to me, 200 costumes. I say, 200. He said, we shoot here, we shoot here. One day. He shakes hand. Deal. That's Rick. He didn't call George on the phone to say, because George knew that we were going to use stock shots. He didn't call George. He decided, because he knew, by just looking at me, he knew that I would have like brass balls to actually shoot that stuff, and that I would be, on the edge all the time. And suddenly I realized that by my side, I had a producer, a real producer. Somebody that sees the end of the show, doesn't just see the money. Of course, he knew about the money. Look at the questions he's asked. But, he knew that the result would be at that level of, and what you saw, is actually, I did my best to shoot, but what you saw, the quality of what you saw, it's Rick. It's because what he decided to do. It's Rick.
How did you find Prague? Was it already like such a vibrant filmmaking industry?
There was a great culture of filmmaking in the Czech Republic, but during the last part of the 80s, I mean, the government had no money to support, but there were 2,500 people at Berendorf, but they did nothing. What happened was my idea was that I wouldn't use anybody from the feature films, that I would only use people in their 20s that had no families, and that could, be away for a year. I mean, the first year we shot for 56 weeks, 6-day weeks, 17 countries. So, it was a huge sacrifice. And the idea was to get people who were just learning their craft and who would do anything in the world to do the best job that they possibly could. And it just happened to be I was able to go to Prague 2 days after the Velvet Revolution, and I could see that Berendorf was going to fold. There was no way that they were going to be able to keep that many people in employment, because it went from a communist world to a capitalist one overnight. And I thought this is a perfect place for us to be based out at, and that became our base for 4 or 5 years.
There were a lot of very talented people. Among them, I think the one who helped you with the attack scenes was Simon Crane.
Yeah, Simon actually was. He has become since then the most well-known and best stunt coordinator in Hollywood. Is done since that scene that we saw, that we did with him. He was a beginner, and he did then Braveheart. He did Titanic. He did
Saving Private Ryan.
Saving Private Ryan.
Very close to what we saw.
So he was he's a British. He was very talented. He was not supposed to do the scene because the scene was not supposed to be shot. So he came the day before, actually, no, 2 days before. At the hotel, at the atrium where we were, and we met at the bar, and he says, "What do you have in mind, René?" And I said, "Well, I want to shoot scene sequences. I don't want to just cut. I'm not." So he said, "You're interested in it's like an aesthetic. C'est un choix artistique. C'est pour l'esthétique." No. It's just narrative. I want to be at the level of the dead with the camera, but I don't want to shoot. I want the people to feel that they are really on the battlefield. So I want to shoot like 20 seconds or 30 seconds shots. And he said to me, "Yeah, but if we do that, René, you're aware that we're going to have to wait for 20 minutes to rig again all the explosives and stuff." I said, "Yes, I know. But I prefer to shot in scene sequence, and then everybody's going to feel that they're really, in danger in a way, even the cameraman." So that's what we did. And he invented a shot. This didn't exist. There is no special effect, no CGI. Everything is real. The explosions. And also he invented a system where basically the people are on trampoline. And so there is something difficult, which is to actually have the trampoline. The stunt men, les cascadeurs, ils courent. Et ils savent, they know where the explosives are, of course, because they're not going to kill them. But at the same time, they don't know when, the thing is going to go up. So there is somebody that is taking care of the trampoline, and he's watching the thing, and he has many extras, so he can start the trampoline on one and the other. And the guy who's running is just acting, is running. And at the same time, so he doesn't know when it's going to go up. And so that also makes a surprise, So everything was designed to actually be as real as possible. But we had only 1 day to shoot.
And night. We went into night.
Yes, we went to night, yeah.
And that day and night. And we can suppose that they were used in Saving Private Ryan because it's the scenes in Saving Private Ryan are quite close.
He was our stunt coordinator for 3 years. He was on every episode where we had stunts.
So I wanted to talk about the casting a bit. So we have 4 people playing Indiana Jones in the series. We first have the main character, Sean Patrick Flannery. How did you cast him?
Casting is like one of the most bizarre experiences because you go through hundreds and hundreds of people. They're coming in. And we try not to cast all day because by the end of the day you're exhausted and you're afraid you're going to miss somebody that's really good because you're so tired. So I would say for about 6 weeks we met close to 250 young actors. Then we narrowed it down to about 10, and then we did screen test, and then Sean Patrick Flannery, we thought was the best, and he was the one who got the job.
What were the main criteria? Was it like, did you have a picture of Harrison Ford to check if he was looking alike? Or?
No, not really. But what we did was we wanted somebody athletic and coordinated, and Sean could do anything. He can ride horses. He was a master in martial arts. He was a good guy. He was a nice guy, and he was prepared to make the sacrifice of being away from home for 3 or 4 years.
And he ended up playing Indiana Jones for much more screen time than Harrison Ford.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, and recently he made an interview in IndieWire about his career as Indiana Jones because of the new Indiana Jones movie. Like, I guess they called him back to get his impression. And I got a quote from this interview about this episode, this Verdun episode, and about working with René. So, René, what's your thought about it? Like, did you see that Sean Patrick Flannery was a bit questioning your way of directing at the time?
Yes, he was, but at the same time, he had done several other episodes with other directors prior to me. So he had kind of... he was used to a different type of directing. Everyone has his own style. And but he was a professional on the show. He never complained about anything. He never said to me that he was doubting me, never. But I got that a surprise because actually Rick sent me. He sent me the article. And so the article was done 3 months ago. And he said in the article that the favorite episode is this one. So it's funny because he says at the same time, I think, that he was doubting all the time. And that from top to bottom, everything I said to him, because of course I talk a lot with the actors because, that's the key, really. This relationship is really the key. And that what I said to him was making sense when he saw the film, that everything was making sense. And it could have been his worst episode because the relationship, because we didn't have a bad relationship, but we had an understanding problem. My English maybe was not that good as well at the time. I don't know, but it was. Thank you, Rick, for sending me this because I would never have imagined him liking this episode. Is his favorite episode? Yeah.
So what was the goal of having different directors for every episode?
Well, because we had such a young crew, and it was their first big job, that they had to prove themselves. The idea was to get as many interesting European film directors who had maybe a experience when they were younger doing television. And I was particularly lucky. I had done 2 films with Nicholas Roeg, and a couple of films with David Hare, which is a very famous playwright in England, and 2 films also with a guy named Gavin Miller. And I couldn't get a director at the very beginning. I couldn't. I went to all the agencies. I said, "Look, we're doing this TV show, but we can't pay a lot for the director. We're making for this for like $600,000-$700,000 an episode. It's going to be traveling, but we are using digital effects, and you're going to be able to edit with George Lucas at Skywalker Ranch. I tried everything, but." And nobody would do it. So I finally convinced Nick Roeg and David and Gavin to do it. And once I did that, then ICM, which was the biggest agency, started sending directors over. And they were very famous directors. I was a friend of Billy August, wonderful Danish-Swedish director, and I asked him out of the blue, never thinking he would accept it. And he said, yeah, no, I'd love to. And he did 2 episodes for us. And then everybody wanted to kind of work on it. And then we had this incredible roster of really great directors.
Yes, Terry Jones, Joe Johnson, Simon Windsor, Vic Armstrong. So yeah, there were 4 actors playing Indy. As I said, there was Corey Carrier, who was playing 8-year-old Indy. There was also an older Indy who was introducing every episode, George Hall. I think it was shot separately. I don't think you didn't shoot that.
No,
those
they were
it
shot
was
separately
separate.
at the end. Yeah.
Carl Schultz shot. I think he shot my bookends. Yeah, Carl. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you can compare the series Old Indy with the cinema Old Indy, because Harrison Ford just played like older Indy now. And there was a cameo from Harrison Ford playing Indy at the time with the Barrett, because he was playing the fugitive, I think, at the time.
Yep.
What was it a goal? Was it a specific goal to link it to the movie to get more audience, or did it just?
No, I mean, I think he was interested in the series, and we just kind of, as a lark, asked him, would he be willing to do it? And he said, yeah, if you come to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and it was snowing and everything else, he said, yeah, if you come to me, we'll do it. And so we went there and shot for a couple of days. So it was great. It was great fun.
The main friend in the series, the main in Indiana Jones friends, is played by Ronnie Coulter. He's a Belgian actor. The friend of Indiana Jones is Belgian. Is called Remy. He's a friend that Indiana Jones meet in one of his adventure. So yes, how did you came to cast Ronnie Coulter?
Well, we got a whole bunch of tapes from France, from Belgium, everywhere. And I'll never forget, it was like the second or third day. We were just watching tapes of people to figure out, because we didn't have the character totally locked in our mind what he was going to be. The minute Ronnie came on, we just looked at each other, and George and I, and just said, that's him. And he was such a special, wonderful, decent, kind guy. It was such a treat to have him on the set. So we kept on writing more and more for him. He was great with the rest of the cast. He made such an effort to meet everybody on the crew, and take, he was just a really lovely, lovely human being. And the character of Remy features in the Verdun episode that we already saw. And there is a beautiful scene where he's wounded. He's at a hospital, campaign hospital. It also really shows how the tone was very diverse in the series. Like it has very serious tone about violence, about history, about war. It really has a message too. And also, I wanted to ask, Remy is Belgian. If people don't know, Indiana Jones fight in the Belgian army in the series. So at one point, he wanted to participate in the First World War, and he decided to enlist in the Belgian army. You also have an episode about the Belgian Congo and how they treated the people there. Why does Belgium has such a big place in the series? The chocolate's fantastic. No, I mean, it was a part of the problem that we had with the series overall was Paramount expected that we were going to make, 20 episodes every year of Indiana Jones, the film, and they were going to get this incredible film franchise for nothing. And even though we were very straight and upfront at the very beginning, we said, no, this is an educational series. Because you have to understand, the United States, only 10% of the country has a passport, and 5-6% of them, of the people who have a passport, have only gone to Mexico or Canada. And you can tell by the fact that that Trump became president, that most people don't know a lot about history as well. So this was George's, dream of the series. I mean, this is why he wanted to make it. And if the studio was dumb enough to think that we were going to have to make, a television film every week about Indiana Jones, they were wrong. So the idea was to take Indy when he was 8 years old, traveling with his father and his nanny, and they would go and meet really famous people who would tell him about the world, about love, about philosophy, about medicine, all the things that, a young boy needed to learn. And then the episodes the following week would be with the 17-year-old who comes he's faced with making, moral choices based on what he's learned as a young man. So that was the idea. Well, that's not a very successful idea for a series. So we had a real problem with Paramount and ABC the first couple of years. In fact, they canceled the show after the second year. But we still found people who were desperate to see us continue to make it. So we ended up doing like 44 one-hour shows and 22 two-hour movies of the week. So it was a fantastic 4 or 5 year period. But it didn't. In the United States, it didn't do as well as we had, originally hoped. But what did happen was every major school in the United States bought the VHS because for history teachers, teaching 10, 12, 14-year-old kids, this was a fantastic way to, keep them involved, teach them about historical characters, and also at the same time, it was great for the kids because they didn't have to listen to a lecture. They got to watch a film. So in the end, it all worked out for us.
And it's why our festival exists too. You watch movies and you learn about history. So yeah,
absolutely.
You didn't answer my question. Why Belgium?
We'll have to talk about that afterwards. It was an important part of the history that we were trying to.
And was it because it's a small country and it was easy maybe for Americans to identify to Belgium that they don't know compared to France, which they have a lot of cliché about?
No, we never thought of it in terms like that. It's just where naturally the story went because Indy he had had serious problems in other countries, so he was forced. The only place where he could actually enlist was in Belgium.
So sadly, Ronnie Coulter passed away in 2000, I think. And also his character, I think in Belgium, he reminded us a lot about a very famous character that we know, which is Captain Haddock. Wonder if it was intentional because his character is very, very similar to Captain Haddock. He's very exuberant, sometimes a bit clumsy like Captain Haddock. Was it on purpose, or is it a coincidence? Because he's Belgian and he's the Captain Haddock.
It was definitely an ode. It was definitely a way of saying thank you for.
Then thank you. And speaking about casting, so beside the main characters that we talked about, there was a lot of huge stars in the series. Daniel Craig, there were Catherine Zeta-Jones, Elizabeth Hurley, Christopher Lee. So it was really a platform to launch some actors to stardom.
Max von Sydow.
Max von Sydow, that's true. I forget a lot. I know.
No, it was again, once we were on a roller coaster and once people could see the episodes, and once actors had the chance to work with, Billy August and Nick Rogue and Mike Newell and all the other wonderful directors, they jumped at it. Most of them were still young and emerging stars. It was just, it was one of those golden periods where everything just worked out and it was fun.
We already talked about all the directors and writers, but I wanted to ask the question about René, because I think, René, you were the youngest director of all the team. So how did it feel? Because you were working with such big names. You already had success in France with Le Passage and with 36 Père Noël, but I guess you must have feel like quite small in that American production in Prague.
They would call me the kid. Everybody was calling me, oh, the kid is here. And when I arrived in Prague the first time, I just saw the list of directors, and, with all those names, I knew everyone. Every one of them had seen their movies. And so Rick was there, and he looked at me and said, "What's wrong, René?" Well, what's wrong? the director's list. That's what's wrong. And don't you think that there is a mistake somewhere? And what is this? I know everyone. The only one I don't know is René Manzor. Who is that guy? And he said to me, René, who drew up that list? Well, I guess you? George. George drew up that list, René. So if George trusts you, don't you think you can do the same? This kind of line, it's basically what we do as directors to our actors, to pump them up, And what a producer has to do, and he forgets it very often, he has to do exactly the same with his directors. He has to pamper them. He has to protect them from the bullshit, from the politics. Otherwise, the director does 10% of storytelling and 90% of politics. When you have Rick by your side, it's like everyone can be the sailor man, Popeye. It's like a can of spinach. He's with you, and then suddenly you turn out to be the biggest director you can be because he's by your side. And basically he says little things, and each time basically pumps you up. So this day, I was maybe the kids for the other ones, but I was not, because my producer said to me that I should trust myself.
We have another sequence that we can show how cinematic was the series.
I don't want anybody to think we had the budget for real planes. Those were models. Those are radio-controlled models.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But what did Paramount complain about? They bought indie movies, right?
Well, I think they wanted, when it first came out, they had 25 million people watching it, but they wanted 40 million. There was nothing you could do, but the world was changing then. HBO had just come out. There were other services that people could go to, and they didn't want to be tied straight to classic network television programming.
I have a good story about this scene, because it shows also how basically when you have a producer like Rick, things can be for a director a bonus, And the show is not the same with another type of producer. I'm telling you why. For that scene, Rick comes to me and says, René, what do you prefer? That we actually build the bike exactly as it was at the time, and we hire a local stuntman to riding it? Or do you want to work with a Czech motorbike that falls out of order like 5 times out of 10, but with Eddie Kidd, the world scrambling champion on the bike? It's your choice. So I said, Eddie Kidd, I want it. And he said, René, the bike is going to be out of order 5 times of 10. Yes, I know, but if I get Eddie Kidd and I get shots with Eddie Kidd, it's going to be incredible. He says, okay. So he gives me the choice, which is, something that is very rare, because producers all the time look at numbers and not at the result. Did he not look at numbers? Of course he did. He knew that whatever I would choose, it would cost the same. So he does his job. But he does more than his job, because he gives me the choice. And it sounds logical, but it's not. It sounds logical to give the choice to the guy who's going to actually direct the scene, put the camera here, ask the actors to do it or not do it, By doing that, basically, he helps me doing the scene that you saw. So that's something that, the audience doesn't know, what happens behind the scenes. But, on a show like that, it makes a huge difference,
There were also innovation in terms of special effects, like we said, even though you also train special effects later on the special edition of Star Wars. But still here you I'm not sure you invented, but it was one of the first time when we would have a crowd duplication, I think.
We did a lot of crowd replication, digital matte paintings. It was also the first TV series ever to be edited on the Edit Droid, which is a non-linear digital editing system. We were starting to develop Pro Tools for sound, for all of our sound work. So it was a learning It was a learning thing.
I must add that, I see all that, of course. But on the scene that you saw on the bike, there is no special effects.
Of course.
It's the real thing.
It was the following year.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the turning point for almost all visual effects companies was during the late 80s. There was Willow, which had the first morphine sequence. There was Young Sherlock Holmes, which had the first digital character that came off. It was a thing. Then The Abyss was the first pseudopod. Then Terminator 2, Forrest Gump. But the big one was Jurassic Park. That was the film that changed everything for everybody who cared about visual effects. Then the world opened up for everyone who was interested in it, at least. And what it did was it allowed writers finally to write whatever they wanted to write with no worries about the studios telling me we can't afford this or whatever. And it allowed directors to have, finally have the opportunity to realize, the vision of what was inside their head. And do it at at a level of cost. Obviously they were expensive effects, but at least that was the beginning that changed a lot for a lot of people.
Did you see Jurassic Park as a go for the next Star Wars? Like, you can go.
Absolutely. I mean, we knew we could do it production wise. We knew. Remember, ILM was an analog company. It wasn't until we started the process of this that George said, no, I want this to be a digital company, which was a very painful process for a lot of people. But, yeah, once Jurassic came out, once we started to see the first previews of some of the work that ILM was doing, that's when we knew, okay, let's go for it. And for Forrest Gump, the reason why that was important was that you could use special effects in a dramatic film that wasn't science fiction, that wasn't, a big, monster movie or whatever it is that, you associate a lot of. It wasn't like a Marvel film or a Star Wars film. It was a regular dramatic story, which, used hundreds of effects in the film.
We talked about the historical figures that Indy would meet during the episode of Young Indy. We have a list here on the screen with most of them: T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, Charles de Gaulle, Winston Churchill. So almost every episode had a big figure. In the Verdun episode, it was the General Pétain at the time, mainly, and other generals that were famous.
And Joffre and
yes,
Nivelle, all the generals.
Yeah, and also we couldn't do that masterclass without showing your other episode with the younger Indy. With Cory Currier as 8-year-old Indy meeting Picasso and Norman Rockwell in Paris.
That was shot in a day too.
So and there is a great story about this one. It's never going to be. I mean, nobody knows about it. But actually, when we were to shoot that scene, I went to see Rick in the prep, and I said, "Look, Rick, I have an idea because I've seen in." The books, illustrations books. At the time, this was the crazy years in France, les années folles. And during those crazy years in some cabaret, you had like chimpanzees in tuxedos serving champagne to the ladies. And so I came with a book and I showed him the book, and it was in prep, like 15 days prior to the shoot. And he said, "René, you're not telling me that you want chimps, Yes, exactly. That's what I'm telling you." And he said, but with the tuxedos, He said, "Do you think it's going to work?" "I don't know, but it's worth a try." And so 2 days later, he said to me, "René, I have the trainer, I have the chimps, and they're going to try, they're going to train it and see if it works." And that. So we had the scene, beautiful. This place, the location is like an opera. It's like a little Garnier, un petit Opéra Garnier.
It's in Prague too?
It's in Prague. It's same. I mean, it's beautiful. And so we set up the scene. And the day of the shooting, I asked Rick for 2 other cameras because I was afraid that, the chimps would do it in one take, but then not anymore. And so we start. Everything was there. The ladies, beautiful dresses, everything was perfect. And so the trainer came and they put the two chimps wearing tuxedos, and they had been trained for that. He put them on the table. And before I could say roll camera, the chimps, they ripped off their tuxedos. They sheet all over the place, all the tables. They pulled the thing, they shot that. And so everything went to the roof. And I turned to the guy and said, "You actually shot this, right?" And the guys, they were frozen. Everyone was frozen because of what happened. So it's the best scene that I ever, saw. But it's not on tape. And so at the end, after the mess, it took us 2 hours to actually clean everything because, with the green poop, it was, terrible. And Rick came to me and said, "René, I did my job. I brought the chimps, the trainer, the tuxedos. Now it's your turn. You have to do your job. So we have to have the scene by the end of the day. We're not going to go for 2 hours of extra time. So what do you propose?" I said, "We're going to do like a Western brawl, Same place." And so it's what you actually saw, which is not the scene that was intended.
But that was one of the great, great experiences working with René, because as a director, he always, I wouldn't say the word pushes you, he's always looking for an alternative way to make each day different, better, more engaging, and that was the real fun of working with him. I mean, once he'd done 2 or 3 days on Verdun, we wanted him to do everything, Paris, and it was a real joy to work with him. The crew loved him, and they were. There's nothing greater than when a director comes to you and says, "I was thinking last night, wouldn't it be great if we did?"
It's not annoying for a producer.
No,
always someone challenging you.
I know, because it's not a challenge; it's making the show better. That's what makes it fun and exciting, and the fact that you never know what he's going to come up with each day, because he'll arrive on set and he'll say, "Hey, I had this great idea. Wouldn't it be great having, monkeys in suits on a thing?" And you say, "Okay, let's try and do it." And that's what makes him a great director, and why it was so much fun to have him on our set.
And you never had George receiving the dailies and said, "What have you done? That was not what was intended."
He totally trusted us, because he's an editor at heart. And what the joy for him was, he was editing all the episodes. And the joy for all the directors were, once they finished, and George would finish a rough cut, they got to go to Skywalker Ranch and spend 2 weeks with him while they did the fine cut of the show. So, for a lot of people, that was, a great experience.
Yeah, and George was actually what was also different from what happens in Hollywood. It's very different with George and with Rick, because I had, of course, also bad experiences in Hollywood. Is that when actually we did what's called the director's cut, le montage du metteur en scène, du réalisateur, and so after that, we had George that would take over, and he would do the final cut. So in the States, we don't have directors. We don't have the final cut. In France, in Europe, we used to have it because it has changed. But at the time, we had it. And so what was a surprise to me is that George sent me the tape of his cut, and he asks for comments. He was all-powerful. He was George Lucas. He was a series. He was the creator of the show. And suddenly he was sending the little French director, the cut, for him to comment. And I called Rick at the time because I didn't want to offend George. And I said, "Rick, is it true? He wants me to comment. I can say anything. If I don't like something, I can say it." He said, "Yes, that's the purpose." I sent like 10 pages of notes, and Rick said, we used like 90% of your comments, which was, doesn't happen like that in the States. No, it doesn't happen like that.
how was the show received? So I think the numbers were quite good. It made 25 million viewers for the first episode. Then it became like from 10 to 12 million viewers per episode, which is quite good. But in the end, like you said, that ABC canceled the show after 2 seasons. What went well and what went wrong with the receptions?
No, as I said, the world was changing. The viewing habits were changing, and it hadn't caught up to the studios yet. So, to have, if you have 1 million views now, that's a huge show. To have 12 million was outstanding, but they just didn't get it. And the thing is we had so much support in Europe.
You got 27 Emmys nominations too,
yeah,
I think. Yeah.
And so that angered the studio too, because it happened after we left them. So again, it was a great experience. We had a great time, and it was a good journey for all of us. So we were very happy with it. And plus, the thing is run. It for 20 years it ran in on the BBC. It was shown every Saturday morning. In Italy,
France too, I think.
In Italy, Spain, Africa. And one of the great things, as I said, was teachers use it at schools, and they have to pay for the VHS and the DVD to do that.
And on the DVD, you ended up producing a lot of documentaries about history to include in the...
Excuse me, we did 96 documentaries about each and every one of all the characters, the main historical figures, which again meant that one day you would watch at school, you'd watch the episode. The next day you'd watch the documentary. So as an educational tool, it was actually very successful.
The series also had a legacy, like we said. It was like a test also for the Star Wars trilogy for you.
Yes.
So was it a master plan from the beginning from George Lucas?
Right from the beginning, when we first started talking about the series, which was in 1989, he laid out the digital vision that he had, but he also laid out, okay, what we're going to try and do is try and do these digital effects on Macintoshes. It was a rebel unit at ILM. I mean, it wasn't part of the real company. It was, 2 buildings that were on the outside of the parking lot, and people were very upset about it. Then the idea was, okay, let's try and do these, because we shot on Super 8 and 16 on Young Indy and with crash cams and everything else. So the idea was, okay, let's take it to a level. We had a film called Radioland Murders that Universal wanted to do. So we said, okay, it's got about 150 visual effects shots. Let's do those digitally and see how well we do on 35, so we could project that. Then the next big challenge was, okay, after Jurassic Park, let's do the special editions and add a whole bunch of digital characters that George couldn't do on the originals because he didn't have the money or the resources. So once we did that, we got an idea of what things were really going to cost. And then that was the big plan. So in 1994, we said, okay, we're starting to we're going to do Star Wars.
And so it ended up with the last Star Wars.
Yeah, thank you.
So, and René, so after that you went back to Europe to shoot Un Amour de Sorcière a few years later, and then Dédale. Then you became also a successful writer. You wrote a lot of books. What impact did the Young Indie series had on your career?
He became a good husband and a wonderful father.
Oh yes, that's too.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Yeah, yeah. The biggest impact was, first of all, there was the sad side was I was comparing my producers to Rick all the time then.
Thank you.
But the good side was when I finished the Young Indie episode, The Cut, Ben Burt was actually editing the show. And Ben Burt is a fantastic sound designer, the best one, basically, the one that invented the sound of the sabre, the sabre laser.
He's done, I mean, he's won 8 Academy Awards. He did Wall-E. I mean, he's done every major film.
And so it's like a master of sound. And this master of sound was editing my show. So at the end, I said, would you mind, Ben, if I was to stay at Skywalker Ranch while you actually do the sound, Because in Europe, basically at the time in the 90s, in Europe, the sound was like an illustration of the picture, nothing more. And in Skywalker Ranch, when I gave basically my cut, George told me, thank you for the 50% of the show. So I realized that they would add 50% of spectacle with the sound. I didn't know that. I mean, as a director, I didn't know that. So that really changed my career then, because I asked George, would you mind, George, if I was to stay at Skywalker Ranch? I will not do my directing thing. I will be very quiet, a good boy. I will be the runner. I will just bring the coffee. But I want to see how those guys work, because in France, it doesn't happen like that. And he said, of course, René, you're more than welcome. You can stay, as long as you want. So I stayed. And of course, I showed that, I saw what they were doing. And then, I couldn't help, what about that? Well, yeah, let's do that. And what about this? And what about this? And so they were happy to please me, And at the end, they got an Oscar for this film. This film got...
This episode
got an Emmy award for the sound. And I was on something else then, but I got a call from Ben Burt. And he said, René, it's thanks to you because you pushed us so hard. I said, no, it's thanks to you guys. And what maybe you got an Emmy, but I got a lesson. And now, for the rest of my career, sound is going to be very, very important.
50% of the experience.
Yeah, exactly.
So we can watch the end of the Verdun episode.
I worked with Gavin Bouquet, who is a fantastic production designer, their production designer that ended up doing the Star Wars 1, 2, and 3. And when we first met, I said to him, Gavin, he showed me pictures and stuff because he had already worked on. And I said, well, that's nice. But you said, Gavin, it's not a story of Verdun that we're doing. I said, what? We're not doing the story of Verdun. What we're doing, the theme is actually how come 3 people in a castle room can decide for the life or the death of 50,000 people a day. I mean, is that the story? Yes, it is. And actually, the story is the power of one. One man can decide to stop that. He can decide to say, I'm not going to be the trigger of the gun. I'm not the gun. They want me to be the trigger, la gâchette. I will not be the trigger of the gun. Fuck the gun. I'm not killing 10,000 people because this order is going to do that. That's the theme of Verdun.
You had that figure of General Pétain, who was a hero during the First World War and who was a traitor during the Second World War in France. And I think to hire a director from the country where the action was setting, here it's quite important. Because of René's input, you changed the bookends with the old Indy to include that story and to show that Pétain was not only a hero.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was a different perspective, which we needed, which made the show even better, and René gave us that perspective.